Welcome everybody to this episode of the Women in Technology Spotlight. Today I have with me Sónia Santos. She is a senior solution engineer for SD-WAN at VMware. Welcome, Sonia.
Thank you. Hello.
So nice to have you here, Sonia. Let's kick it off with a little bit about yourself. Tell us who you are and where you live, what you enjoy.
So my name is Sonia. I am Portuguese. So I was born and raised in a small town in Portugal. I'm the youngest of four daughters, and I lived in Portugal all my life up until 2017. And then I decided to, experience other adventures, other professional challenges outside of my country. So I first went 2 years to work in Spain, in Valencia. And then I had enough of the sun and the good weather. So I decided to come to London. And I've been here for 2.5 years now. So that's me.
Okay. Immediate question. So a question that usually we don't like to get asked, but your English is very good, but then you say you spent most of your life in Portugal and in Spain. So where do you learn to speak English this well?
Well, actually, it's my mother. She's 78, but she speaks very well English. She learned when she was at school. Mm-hmm. And so for me and my sisters, when we were learning to read and write in Portuguese, she actually started to teach us as well to read and write in English. Very basic texts, very basic stories. But I think that is the right time for you in life to learn a new language. Mm-hmm. And I think that a switch was turned on. So it was always easy for me and my sisters to understand and to speak English. So thank you for that.
That's an interesting point you made about learning languages early. I agree. I think it's a very good thing to at least lay the foundation when you're very young.
Yes.
So you grew up in a household full of girls. You said you are the youngest of four daughters. Tell me a little bit about how you grew up, what your mom did, what your dad did, maybe, and what kind of education you had.
So it was a pretty traditional household for Portugal, where you usually, so my father was always employed, my mother not so much. She was on and off jobs, and it was actually hard for her to keep a job, especially if it was a job that included some commute or something, because she had a large amount of children in the house, and traditionally it was more the women who would take that than my father. But still, saying this, it was a very strong woman environment, as you can imagine, so many women, and everybody studied. Even my mother, I remember my mother when I was small, she was going into high school, trying to complete her education, studying in the evening. So it was a very strong mindset of work and value. And apart from that, then I had also another very strong woman in my life, who was my grandmother. And she was actually the only one who could read and write in her village. And she was very a wise woman. And I think she was very important as well in my upbringing.
So you already had two really strong female role models. Yes. As a young girl. Yes. Tell me a little bit about what kind of school you went to and what your basic education was like.
So all the way to high school, at some point you have to choose if you want to go to learn more about languages or if you want to learn more about science. Mm-hmm. And at the time, I was not that bad at math, so I didn't do what mostly people do, who is run away from math and go and learn with languages or other social subjects. And so I actually went to science, but I didn't actually know what I wanted. Mm-hmm. So my father worked in a bank. I thought that was a good idea. So I was more on and off. I studied accounting, I studied management, and so I never had this passion or this thing about going to a computer science related education. But then in my hometown, there is a school, and they opened a new course which combined IT and management. So I thought, okay, why not? And so that's what I did. I went for it and I made my bachelor's. Actually, I made it quite early because I was an early start in school. So I made it at 20. And that's when I started to work full time after that. I completed the rest of my education while at work. So, but at 20, I was already working on IT.
Wow. So this is interesting. I mean, a lot of women I've talked to, they didn't have an early passion for tech, but I feel, and maybe it's my opinion, but I want to ask you, so do you feel this is because you didn't have any role models that were in IT, or was it just not something that anyone else did around you? What is the reason, do you think?
Well, first, this was very early on. So this was 93 when I first went to this college. And yeah, definitely I didn't have any role models around me. So everybody that I knew had very traditional professions. I did have some colleagues that were fortunate to have computers, but it was just for play. And you know that usually girls are not as prone to gaming in computers as boys. So there wasn't an actual drive or anything that I could say, oh yeah, that's what I want. No. But then as I learned and I got into it, it slowly grew on me. And I definitely could see that it was a good way to go. And I'm very fortunate that I was there at the time to make that choice.
So I'm wondering, you said a new school opened and a new course, and it was a combination of IT and management. So when you started out on that course, did you have any idea what it would be like? Or was it just, oh, this is something new and I'll try it and it sounds interesting? What was the motivation?
At the time, the only thing that I really liked sort of was accounting, because my mother used to work in accounting. And I knew that the course had an accounting component as well. And about IT, I didn't know anything. I assumed that it had some software development and things like that. I thought it was very important for me as well to learn how to handle a computer, not only as a programmer, but also as a user, and to be good at it, because I knew that more and more that was being asked for at companies. So yeah, I think that I just looked and I said, okay, so if I like one thing, I go to one side. If I like the other thing, I'll go to the other side. So it was all about keeping the spectrum open until as late as possible. And in that aspect, I think it was a quite good and generalist course to make.
So that's so interesting that it was actually accounting that pulled you into that course and not the IT part. So then you were 20 and you went to work. What did you do?
Yes. So my first real IT job was actually at the Ford plant. There was a big electronics plant. They built the radios for the cars and airbag modules and all electronic things. And it was very interesting because, so I started as a developer, and it was the first and only time in my life where I could actually see the product of what IT is doing. So you could actually look at the radio and I would think, okay, so part of my programming of what I did is actually on that product. And that palpable feeling that, you know, it's a tangible product that you're looking at. It's something that I never had ever the rest of my career, but it was something very, very good. And the experience, I mean, in terms of human resources, in terms of internal organization, I mean, Ford is probably one of the best companies that exist, because they have been doing it for a long time. So it is very, very interesting. Yeah.
So your first job was actually an very male-dominated field, even more than not just IT, which is already very male-dominated, but then also cars. I mean, that's kind of like the perfect storm of male interest.
True.
How was that like? I mean, you're a young girl with 20 going into Ford to develop car radios and airbags and software.
Well, there were actually two realities inside of the plant. One was what they call the hourly, which were the people that were actually working on the product themselves on the lines. And those, the large majority were women because they had small hands.
Oh,
so fine things, you know, they had to do very fine gestures. And so most of them were women. But then you went to the office area and it was completely the opposite. So every engineer, technical engineers, technical design, everything, logistics, everything was a completely, the majority, the big majority were all men. So, and of course, all the plant managers and the plant directors and all of those people that I had to speak to quite often were all male, of course. And I think they were quite amused sometimes by the fact that I was so young and a woman. So it was very interesting, a very interesting experience, yeah.
So how long did you stay there?
I stayed there, I think 5 or 6 years. But then first that plant was Ford, but then Ford made a spin-off to the electronics. So then was not called Ford anymore, was called Visteon, because I was doing exactly the same thing. And then Visteon made an outsourcing contract with IBM. And so I became a full-time IBM employer, everything without leaving the same desk, right? So it was very interesting. Who am I working for today? Oh, okay, that's good.
That's very cool. From one very big name in car manufacturing to another big name in software, and actually IBM is very well known. Did anything change in that, in the environment through those changes, or was it just different names and the same thing?
So between Ford and Visteon was just a pure name change. But then, of course, when IBM came, they had other customers. And so they tried to use us as well for their other customers. So then I eventually started working. First, I started to work more with networking, which is what I have focused my career on. So I gave up developing. I was sick and tired of being a developer. I didn't want that. So I went to networking, and when IBM came, they asked me, what do you want? Do you want to pursue networking, or do you want to pursue, I was a team leader at the time, and they asked me, do you want to pursue a management career or something more connected to the software application area or networking? And I said, networking, please. Okay. So that's when I came to networking, and then yes, things started to change a lot because they began to pull me to a number of projects, and soon enough I was not at the plant anymore. So I was in Lisbon. I was working for banks and other companies. Yep.
Tell me, so you were leading a team and you got the option to go into management. What made you decide to stay on the technical side instead of going that path?
Well, I was very young, very, very young, and I felt very insecure. And I honestly, it was not something that was in my plans. I always wanted to know how things work. I'm very passionate about the logic behind things. And you know, it all sounds a little bit magic, but then there's things that happen in behind the scenes. And I was always very interested in knowing how those things work. And I guess that I was more interesting about that than actually pursuing a management career, which for me, it had a very interesting part, but again, it would mean that I would have to move away from the technical sides, and I was not ready to do that. I was too young to do that.
And So for what you do now, there are certain skills that are important. Of course, there's the technical side that you're passionate about, but what characteristics that you have do you think are really important for your job besides technical?
I would say I'm a very logical person, and I try to be pragmatic as much as possible, and I think that's very important because, you know, when you start to talk technical stuff, it's very easy to get lost. It's very easy to begin here, and once you notice, you are speaking about something completely different. So I think that it's kind of easy for me to keep the focus and to be pragmatic and logic. Again, I think those are my three. And from early on, also the ability to talk to people, every kind of person, from you name it. I can speak to everybody, and I try to relate with everybody. And I think that that's also very good for people to open up and to share knowledge as well.
Yeah. Very good point that you just made. I think communication is one of the big skills that are very important in tech at the moment, and I think for quite a while now. So you were quite young still when you left IBM. What happened after that? What did you do?
So after I left IBM, I went to work for an ISP, the third ISP in my country, which was an awesome experience. Because I had only worked with banks, and so working for an ISP was definitely very good. And after that, I went to work for distributors. I did a little bit of everything, but I was always very focused on the ISPs. I would either work directly to them, or I was working as an outsourcing or as a contractor. So I have always been involved in that area because it's what I liked.
So working for internet service providers makes a lot of sense with what you're doing now with SD-WAN. So how long have you been at VMware?
So I came into VMware last year in June 2020, so mid-pandemic. I actually just met my team last week, in physically, I mean. But it has been quite a while, quite a ride. It is my first time in a vendor, so I have never worked in a vendor. I was usually the either the end customer or the one that pulls the why is this not working? So now I'm actually the one on the other side of the phone saying, oh, this is not working, but we will sort it soon enough.
So tell me, in terms of your role, you are now in pre-sales like I am. What do you like about that? What is different from what you did before? And tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, I'm helping. I feel that I'm helping people to make something work. So if they're stuck in a place and we don't understand how this works, and sometimes it doesn't even work, but I'm able to help them either to understand how that is supposed to work, or a workaround that they can overcome if the product doesn't do that specific thing. And I like this usefulness. I like to feel useful, I guess. And it's and of course, I also like the kind of relationships that are built with the customers, because you actually have to build a trust relationship. I think that's the thing that I like the most, definitely.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about what your day looks like. Obviously, you started in the middle of the pandemic, so it's not necessarily what your job would look like if you could travel and go to customer sites and things. But tell us a little bit about what you do on a daily basis.
So currently, I'm assigned to a single customer, but this customer has several countries around Europe that are launching the product, and so my usual day is I will have weekly meetings with each one of these countries. I will understand what their problems are, what their challenges are at the moment. I will try to help them overcome those challenges. If there is anything new in the product, I will try to convey that to them, see if they want to test it, see if they want to engage in that new feature. And I also have to, of course, do a lot of labbing. I need to do labs for myself also to understand how the product actually works so that I can explain that to the customer. And yeah, I work very closely with the product management team. They must think that I'm a big pain, but I try to I mean, not only advocate for the customer, but also for things that, of course, as a technical person, I also have my opinion. So it's important to convey all that. So that's my usual work. Yeah.
Cool. So I was wondering, while you were telling me what you do, does your family understand the work you do?
No. You know what I usually tell people when they ask me, what do you do? And I say, I do drawings, because there's a lot of diagram going on. So, and in the end, if I look at my agendas or if I look to my notebooks, it's all full of drawings and arrows here and arrows there. And, occasionally a user with a laptop or a phone or an antenna or something like that. So I usually just say drawings. That's what I do for a living.
So obviously you enjoy what you do and you love your job. Is this something you would recommend young women to go in, this field of IT and tech? Is it something you recommend?
Yes, definitely. I must say that before going into networking, I was a little bit concerned because there's a physical part to it, because you need to go to the data centers and physically attach some devices and work with racks and all of that. So there is that physical part. There is also the availability part, because many times you have to be on call, you have to upgrade. You don't upgrade something 10 a.m. in the morning. You'll have to do it usually at 1 a.m. in the morning. So sometimes you have to physically go to data centers, God knows where, and be there. And so there is a physical component. And what I very quickly learned is that thanks to ergonomics, well, first, nobody assembles anything by themselves. There's usually a couple of people there. And even if you're by yourself, there's something called ergonomics. So you have all sorts of elevating platforms and automatic screwdrivers, and it's no sweat. So there is nothing to be afraid of. And not only that, but also the part of the availability. I am very fortunate because my husband also works in IT. So if I tell him I will be at 3 a.m. doing an upgrade in a data center somewhere, he won't ask a lot of questions because he understands what I'm doing and what I do. And so that also has plays a very important role as well, definitely.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, it all totally makes it easier if your partner understands what you're doing, because if he's not in IT and you tell him I need to go to a data center in the middle of the night. Yeah, that could be discussion.
There could be several questions following.
Yeah. But let's not make it, it sounds a little bit as if you were always available for work. But I think what this is more about is flexibility, right?
Yes.
So this, I think, is also one of the aspects that are great for women, that you can, be flexible with your time and decide a lot when you work. Is that for you as well?
Yes, definitely. And I mean, although I don't have any children of my own, but I have always studied a lot. And of course, I'm a very generalist person, so I have a lot of interests outside of work. And that was something very important for me from day one, was never to let work eat your life away. So there's a specific time frame for work, and there's a specific time frame for everything else. And of course, now with the pandemic, even more flexible. If we already had some flexibility, I think that now we have even more flexibility, because remote work is not a bad thing anymore. It's a given. So and I usually tell, I was talking to 17-year-old teenager, a girl, and she was thinking, oh, I would like to do this, I would like to do that, and I told her, try to choose something that gives you flexibility to work in other countries, flexibility to work in other in other settings, you know, if because she was on to flexibility, and I told her so. And this is definitely a good place to be if flexibility is important.
Very good advice, I think, and that's what I try to explain to all women, that tech is a good field to give you the means, the resources, and the flexibility to have a life besides work, and also arrange the things that are important to you around your work schedule and the other way around. So yeah, so good advice.
And it's also a good place to make an honest money and good money. I mean, you can do more, you can do less, but wages are very very good considered to other average work that a woman would generally go for. So, and I think that financial independence is also a very, very key factor for women.
I agree.
And it's a good goal.
It's also very important to tell everyone and to understand that this is a place where you have job security, because we have a lot of need for people who work in IT. There's good money to be made and a lot of flexibility. So just because I see the half hour is already over for some reason. I would just maybe would you like to give some kind of tip or recommendation to young women going into the work field? I mean, we already obviously talked about choosing flexibility, but something you might want them to know, what you would have liked to know when you were younger, when you were 20 maybe.
I think that sometimes we question things too much, and we when we think about doing something, we go and I won't do it because of this or that, and we have this big list of things of no's why we shouldn't do whatever. And one thing that I think that I learned at an early stage is that you go and try. Trying, nobody ever got in trouble for trying. So first you try, and then you sort out if all of those no's are really no's, or if those no's are maybes, or if there are no no's, and you just you know, you can just do your path and build your career, whatever it is, in whatever field you like.
That makes perfect sense. Don't stop yourself. Try it out and then find out if it's the right thing, because you're right, women tend to just, you know, not try when it goes wrong or something.
That is true.
Sonia, thank you so much for sharing your journey.
Welcome.
And
thank you for having me as well, of course.